And I think that was a huge challenge. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think the one thing that is most important is with that change, we have to hope that the right type of developer comes to the table. And I think with that zoning and as an economic development committee, if we know of people and we have some suggestions, and if we want to kind of prepare them, I think it's well within our purview to go out and have one-on-one conversations with the development community to kind of encourage the type of development that we want downtown. So I think we've done the first step, which is getting the zoning. The next is getting a project.
I think that's right. You know, I think to the extent we can, you know, have our ears to the ground and encourage the types of businesses that we want and the type of development we want, I think that's great. You know, I'm really hoping that, you know, this is enough to at least open the door to possibility of doing something great. So yeah, it's been a crazy few weeks, and like, you know, this was, I appreciate things, but this was a ton of people who did a ton of stuff. And this was the fact that, you know, the other boards and committees collaborated too, so that we could come to consensus. And, you know, going in there, even though I don't know exactly how each individual voted at the end, but going in there knowing that we had, you know, full support of all the boards and committees that were relevant, minus one advisory committee member, I think was huge and gave people a lot of confidence. And yeah, I was surprised and interested by some of the suggestions that were made on the floor, but you know, I think in the end the product is really good. And some of those people are like, you're really knowledgeable about this. Where have you been? All these months. But no, but I think I'm pleased. I think people were, you know, pleased with it. And, you know, I really hope this does lay the foundation to do something positive down there, because it's just, it can be better. It can be so much better.
100%. And I know that on our agendas, the downtown district has taken up an awful lot of time and effort for people. And so what I want to do is not get in a situation where we perhaps bite off more than we can chew and overburden people. I want to make sure that now that we've hit the big goal, we identify some smaller ones and work towards them. And at the same time, you know, keep our eyes open for what can happen in our downtown. Do we have any more discussion on that particular topic? Okay. Next up on the agenda is the EDC budget for fiscal year 2022. Marika, do you want to give a little bit of background there?
Yeah, the first thing I want to say is I need to make a small correction because even on the form that I was sent, I guess it should be fiscal year 2023. So I know it seems a bit early, but I guess time flies. We need to decide, yeah, basically per line item, if we what we want to ask for our next budget cycle. I looked at a few things. I think for now, my suggestion is to kind of keep it the same. Basically, I know we haven't spent a lot of our current budget because we had success in getting grants. So that paid for a lot of our contracted services and even printing materials. I actually just asked a senior through the tax write-off program to update our Shop Sobo database, at least with all the new business certificates. All that work is kind of being put on the back burner, but it might be the last time we printed the business directory was 2019. So maybe that's a thing we want to come out with a new one for 2023. So that would definitely need some money to print those brochures, or what is it, directories. Contracted services, depending on our new projects. I think our focus is Route 9. Hopefully we'll be successful in getting more grant money, but if not, we might need that money to have some studies done. or help with whatever we decide to do. In-state travel, I mean, it's not a lot to begin with. I would just keep that the same. What else? I guess office supplies we could reduce. I mean, it's just kind of small amounts, but we asked for 500. We could reduce it to 300 if we wanted to. You know, it's not. And what else do we have? Dues and memberships. I think we need to keep that at 800 because we pay the 495 Metro S partnership annual fees, which are $500 for the town. And we have a membership to the Corridor 9 495 Regional Chamber of Commerce, which is also more than $300. So that's easy. We might actually have to increase that slightly. My other ask or comment, something to think about, is do we want to add anything towards beautification? Maybe like downtown district beautification. We had through the Shared Streets program, we had some planters installed. We have volunteers who are willing to maintain it. We don't have money to kind of buy plants, and I've been going around town to different departments. And of course, no one has budgeted for it. And Mark Purple advised me to basically put it in the budget for the next fiscal year, and they could always decide if they want to put it in the EDC budget or somewhere else, but maybe that's something to think about. Do we need money for programming? If we want to do some programming in downtown to get people there and to help our businesses with customers, basically, do we want to, think about that? So those are all my comments.
Okay, it sounds like you've done a lot of thought. I see a couple of people with hands raised. I think I saw John first, and then I saw Chris. John?
I thank you for recognizing me. I have a couple thoughts. I know next year is going to be a rough fiscal year in the town already. So if we could come in at, right, I think if we lowered our office supplies down that couple $100, I think we come in at net zero, at level funding. Or even if we came in with Marika's increase and that's it, I think that shows a lot. I know this year we didn't use a lot of budget because we were fortunate to win a lot of grant money, but that's good. So we can put that back. That was what the last few years when I went to advisory with budget, I said, what we were trying to do is, I wanted the contracted services. So if we got grant, if we wanted to go after grants that we couldn't write ourselves, we could have people write and hire consultants, and then you'd get it back. And that always seemed to work out well. The other thing that I think I'd love to think about, maybe not for this year, but for next year, if Marika's already doing full-time work, it would be great to have her full-time to think about that, because we could actually have things, we have quantitative data that we can show what we've done, grant money we've received and distributed to help the small business. I know just those tents saved Ola and Tomaso's probably about, I don't know, $20,000 to $30,000 each by us getting those and having them there, and the heaters and different things like that. So, I mean, we have quantitative data showing we're doing good things, whether people want to agree with it or not. This year, I've always said I want to delve into Route 9. I can't wait to have more time to do that. And now that more things are open and get more grant money for that. So with that coming up, maybe not this year, but if that's something you'd be, I don't want to try to talk you into coming full-time, but I'm trying to talk you into coming full-time. That might be something to entertain. And for either, I don't know if this year's the year, but maybe next year, if, once we start really digging into Route 9 and figuring out what the town wants on Route 9, and then, because what did they say at one of the planning hearings? Zone for what you want. We should figure out what the town wants on Route 9 and figure out how to do that. And I think once we start really getting into that, I think that's going to take a lot of time, more than 4 blocks of downtown did, personally. So I think this year, if we could, maybe come in level funded, and next year, that's just my advisory hat. You can't be on 10 years of advisory and not be cheap. And that's sorry.
Sorry, John. I'm sorry.
that?
I'll speak after Chris. Sorry, I had a question for you, but Chris can speak first.
That's pretty much it for me. So
Chris?
John, I just want to second what you said. I agree with you about showing a lean budget, level funding. And the other thing is I can't emphasize along with you, John, enough that whatever we submit, the big thing that we should be showing is all the grant money we've brought in, a footnote along with our budget, a whole section of the grants, a little statement about where that money was applied and any other important thing in the budget. That's the big thing. Level funding and showing all the grants we've had every time we communicate during these. I've heard of the same thing about some difficult financial challenges. All the grant money we've been responsible for is going to get a lot of attention and appreciation.
Thank you, Chris. Matt?
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure intuitively, or maybe you can elaborate on why you think next year will be a difficult year for the town. It's more of just a question. I don't have any objection to level funding, but I've done budget processes professionally for 25 years, and you always usually put in what you think you need, but you also recognize there's going to be some give and take. So I don't necessarily want to go with a number that's going to get chiseled away. Just because we think the fiscal situation is difficult, but maybe if you can elaborate on why you say that, I just don't know.
Matt, well said. Thank you.
I said it just because I know the revenues are going to be down from what they're projecting.
And
This
do
year.
we know why though? Just I would think property values are up 20% across the board. I don't know why that wouldn't translate into higher property tax revenue. I hope it doesn't, but
We lost a lot of properties off the tax revenue to St. Mark's.
Okay.
The nonprofits, different things like that.
The
Capital expenses,
commercial revenues have been down. because
commercial
of all the
revenues are
people moving
down.
out.
So and with capital expenses, OPEB, all those different things. I know last year was lean and this year was going to be harder, because you might not get the state monies that you thought, different things like that. So I understand what you're saying, prepare what you want and get chiseled. Coming in level funded, we won't get, I don't believe we'll get chiseled down. I think it's appreciated and we have enough because we get the grant money and the contracted services we did the last few years, we've had that a little bit by like $3,000. So that way, if we want to go after grants and then we get it back, and it just shows good faith in the town. And I've said this many times before, and I'll say it again. I don't believe Southborough has as much of a spending problem as it does a revenue problem. That's why I got on this committee, and I'd love to try to increase the commercial revenue somehow on Route 9 and figure out what we can do to get the more business in. What's funny is our vacancy rate, Matt, isn't as bad as it sounds. Like I think we're posted at like 21%. But after like Marika and I met with most of the business owners, the building owners, and most of them said they have like less than a 5 or 8% vacancy rate. The problem is we have the CAS building, which is a very big building that takes up that brings up the percentage rate. Yeah. And I don't see, because we have such a surplus of other office buildings, and with companies shrinking their footprints due to COVID and people working from home, it's going to get smaller and smaller. So I don't think they projected the CAS building to be rentable for probably 10 years at best, because it's going to need an overhaul of like $55 a square foot to be rented out at $20 a square foot. I'm just making those numbers up. So that kind of doesn't help us. So figuring out how to get something in there, have them sell it, do something, that would be great. The Andrea across the street, blighted building, same thing, if we could get stuff in there. But that's why I'm saying go and lean. It's just from what I've heard from other people in other departments and different things.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and just for context for Matt, because it's his first budget cycle, knock on wood, but we always go in prior to budget decisions, and we talk to advisory and we explain different changes in our budget. And knock on wood, but we haven't had a lot of difficulty in getting what we need because we do, we consistently, this year was a little off for certain things, but consistently we use about exactly what we asked for, and it hasn't been a problem for us to go defend it. And so it's not this big give and take where they're trying to chop it every quarter. At least that hasn't been historically.
Okay, that's
Plus,
great to hear.
we're a very small budget comparatively to a lot of other
That is true.
departments, and there's not a whole lot to cut out of ours, and it's already been done. So, but that's just my thought. We could look at it more and talk to advisors, see where they lean, and things like that. But
I think that's a very good path going forward. Level funding right now is, I think, well within what we can do. I think the fact that we spent a lot of time on the downtown district and the zoning and had a lot of push there, we've got to identify some new initiatives and then think about for not fiscal year 2023, but fiscal year 2024, whether or not that's the time to bring Marika on, because some of these new initiatives might require more outside help from other organizations or service providers and things like that. So I think I actually really like that idea of level funding. So we'll try our best to do that for the budget. I think that'll be one of the goals. Next on the agenda is new initiatives and goals going forward. I'm going to say that this agenda item came from an outgrowth from something, John, you may have mentioned to me, where you said, wouldn't it be great if the Andrea restaurant had a microbrewery there? And I said, that's a perfect location because it's easily accessible. It's right on 9. It's got visibility, and that building's been empty for some time. The one thing that I just checked before this meeting is that we don't really have a definition for a microbrewery or something like that within the business highway zoning district. And at least from the organization where I work, craft breweries are considered manufacturing. So in looking at the zoning, retail sales and services involving manufacturing of products, the majority of which will be sold on premises to consumers, not with more than 4 persons engaged in the manufacturing operations. That's what we have for manufacturing in the business highway district. If there are 5 people brewing the beer, it would not be in compliance. So maybe there's a chance for us to talk with the planning board about doing some zoning updates to the Route 9 corridor, so that if we wanted to get a craft brewery on 9, which is more visible, I'd take one in downtown, but if we want to get one on 9, we might have to take a look at the zoning on 9 to get something like that. Yes, John.
so there's lots of problems with having a microbrewery on Route 9 besides just zoning. There's
Yeah.
no water. For a
There's no
brewery, you need a lot of
water.
water. So I mean, what I'd love to see, but going in that direction, I would love to see us have somebody figure out, like, if we could do a mail drop in every door, if we have the money in the budget this year to do an every door mail drop, another survey like we did with downtown, see what people want on Route 9. Again, see what they'd like to see. Would you like to see multi-use? Would you like to see restaurants? What do you want to see? Do you want car dealerships? Do you want apartments? See what people are actually looking for on there. And then we could, my thought was even hire like Sarah that used to work in planning, have her, because she knows our zoning code pretty well, and say, Sarah, if we wanted to do something like this on Route 9, what would it take for zoning? She'd be honest, and she's respected by our planning board. So we could say, Sarah looked at it and took a look and said this, if that's something should be amenable to, or another outside consultant, and just figure out what would need to get to that point, what zoning changes would have to happen to make that work. I think that would be easier than just going to planning and saying, hey, what zoning changes do you think we could do for this? I think we had specific goals, like we want to have a microbrewery, or what do they call it? If it's not a microbrewery, when they just a draft house, with
Yep.
a tap house. If you could get a bigger brewery out of, like there's a couple up in Vermont that I know of that maybe we could talk into coming down here that might want to open a tap house, where that way it's not manufactured on scene, but they could have the tap house and have their things there. So if we could even figure out like logistic, what would work, what wouldn't, has what. I know Jack Bartolini's property on the other side of Route 9. Not that he doesn't have town sewage, he doesn't have town water going to it. So, things like that are issues. So I think if we could identify all the issues on Route 9 that we know of, or reach out to people and find out what we need, besides water and sewage, and have somebody find out what would like in these places, like multi-use or anything, and then go after the zoning that way. I think that would probably be the easiest approach.
So I suppose I have a question, because I didn't realize that there was no water to that particular site. So do we want to?
There's water to the Andrea. It's on the other
Yeah.
side of Route 9. Sorry. So I just don't know if it's adequate for a brewery. Takes a lot of water.
Okay, yeah. No, but what I was thinking was, there is what people want, and then taking a look at the zoning and whether or not it fits.
Right.
There's also taking a look at the infrastructure that's there and what could use that infrastructure. Because if it turns out that, mixed use housing can't go in there because there's not enough water and there's no area to put stuff, why even go down that particular path?
Exactly.
So do we want to see if we can get grants or things for the study of the infrastructure first, or do the survey first? I'm kind of like
Could you do it
debating both in my
simultaneously?
head. I'm sorry?
Could you do it at the same time?
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
Go
Because
after the grants, but you're
think-
right. I mean, if
Yeah.
we could figure out the infrastructure, and then once the survey comes in, you'll get that even ready, what we want as a survey question, while we're trying to find out the infrastructure. Then once we get the survey back, we could say, we check all these up, say, nope, can't work, that can't work, that can't work. And then figure out what's left, I guess.
Yeah. I think that maybe doing it simultaneously works. Marika, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think we've had, actually in the past, we've kind of touched on this topic about Route 9, and we used a lot of the previous research that is kind of old, but still a lot of it is relevant. And there were multiple issues, I guess, identified that are problematic or that could use some improvement. One was, I guess the permitting process, and that I think that triggered in the past that we created, or the EDC created the permitting guide. Zoning, outdated zoning was an issue, still is an issue. The lack of wastewater infrastructure, but also the capacity of other infrastructure like water and electricity, which is currently sufficient for what is there now. But if you're going to put in like a microbrewery or maybe another use or a mixed use or housing, I don't know, that might become a problem. And I think and some of these things are outdated also because of our current situation after the pandemic, that the whole economic situation has changed. And I think it has shown that we need to be more flexible with our zoning. Like John and I and others, we spoke to a lot of these businesses and asked them, like, what is the problem? Why are certain companies not, attracted to Southborough? Altogether, it was, the lack of amenities, the last mile option, getting young people or any, workers who don't have a car, who still want to work here, who take the train, getting them to the office parks. So I think there's a whole group of things that we had identified we did apply for grants. And I think we still have one outstanding application for which we are expecting a reply, which is for a wastewater kind of study. The other thing is I think we need to continue submitting grant applications. Maybe we should talk to, I know Marty is now on the, the Metro West Transportation. I forget the name of it or the acronym, but there's a lot of money also for bigger regional projects. And I think especially if you're talking about wastewater and water infrastructure, maybe, you have to look at it at a little bit of a bigger perspective and see if there's any money out there to address that. So I think zoning, you also should have a look at it more holistically and not say, okay, we want a microbrewery or what do residents want, but basically to see what is the current business environment and how do we zone to be more flexible. If that makes sense.
And I see that point. I was thinking about the microbrewery as a microcosm for zoning that was slightly out of date. The one concern that I have is we just did zoning for the downtown.
Mhm.
And although Route 9 desperately needs to have that zoning looked at again, I'm not sure that should be the full rewrite should be our next goal. Maybe something a little bit smaller and achievable might be better.
Agreed. The last mile, by the way, getting back to that, Marlboro EDC is now running a shuttle from Southborough's train station to the Apex Center, as well as I forget where else in town. It might be worth reaching out to them to find out if we could tap into their bus to go while they're cutting through our town from there to go to Marlboro. If we could have them drop at, White's Corner, over Charlie Square there to drop people off. And maybe again, the other one that Marika and I had spoken to was off of what's that, is that not Framingham Road? What were those places we went to, the hydrogen place, Marika? Where was that?
Yeah, it's oh god, is it Oak Hill? If you go to Algonquin.
Yeah, over by
Drive.
Algonquin, there's a bunch of companies back there. I didn't even know were really back there, and they were saying that they were having a hard time attracting young talent because of no last mile, and they even offered, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, because they said they'd even pitch in towards it if we could get something moving over there. So you might want to see if we can tap into that. Do we have to, going a little off topic, but not really. So if these companies wanted to put money, give the EDC money to help get for like last mile and different things like that, get a shuttle running, we'd need to set up a revolving fund or something like that, I believe. Maybe we should look into that, because that way, if businesses want to advertise or donate, we could actually get them to pitch in for things and ask, because we'd have the actual correct legal funding to do process of doing it.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up. The Middlesex 3 Coalition, which covers the Route 3 corridor from Burlington to Lowell, actually has set up what is called a TMA, Transit Management Association. And they actually get grants from the state to run bus service. And it basically goes from a couple locations, Alewife Station out to Billerica and Burlington. We have a commuter rail station. So if we did do a TMA, perhaps it might be smaller. I can do outreach to Stephanie Cronin, who runs Middlesex 3, and ask her what type of process she went through to set up something like that. And maybe that might be something where we can go after some state grants and then talk with the businesses about pitching in to do something like that.
I think that would be great. I mean, that would be like getting something like that going. Sounds like it could be an easy victory And I know a lot of the businesses really wanted that in town.
Yeah.
So if we could do that, that would be great. Last mile's kind of always been one of my little pet projects.
Yeah, I'll ask her about that, and maybe if it's too complex for me to carry over, maybe I'll have her come and talk with us about what she went through, some of the issues that she had to address, and whether or not it could work for our community. So maybe that's one of those initiatives. Transportation and last mile could be one of the things going forward in the new year. You know, I was only partially joking about the craft brewery on 9. I drive past that Andrea all the time, and it is it's an eyesore. So the Kaz looks better, but it's the same thing. Empty, obsolete, and I'm not sure what's going to go in there. So the Route 9 is always going to get us a bigger bang for the buck. So I think that should be one of the new initiatives and goals that we have going forward.
If I may, can I make a?
Oh, yes, Chris.
I think the great resource we can tap into is people like Bill DePietri, Arthur Holmes with Holmes Realty, the developers who understand what the opportunities are or not. And I know Bill owns 10 of the office buildings, and long before the pandemic, they had one of the lowest vacancy rates of almost anybody. And it's because of their customer service and dealing with the tenants and providing extraordinary service. So I think that they're a must because they can tell us right away what's going to make it. So that's one item. The second one is in terms of the Andrea restaurant, I think we need to, there's no chance that anybody's going to work with that building. It's got to come down, but I don't know if there's a fire department issue but there have been other towns, and I'm sure Robert Bob, that you've dealt with this stuff in Billerica where you've had eyesores, and there's got to be no one should be allowed to have a building like that rot in a prime location and be the eyesore that it is. And I think a critical element effort has got to be made to have that removed. And of course, the minute you do that, all the requirements of septic and everything else go into play. I don't know how you overcome it, but that's all I've got.
Yeah, well, I don't even know who owns that particular property. But while we're on the idea, and I've thrown out a couple of them, are there any other goals and initiatives that the committee feels might be something that may have gotten lost when we focused so much on the downtown, and maybe we might want to focus on this year coming up and going forward?
I'd like to see the business outreach that we were doing before pick back up again. I thought that was really helpful to find out what was going on.
Yeah.
Marika did a pretty good job with that. If we could keep that up, and maybe, you know, if some of the powers that be in town, like administrators or board of selectmen, would be interested in attending and meeting them, I think that always carries a lot of weight for the owners. I think if we could do more sense of place, like for downtown, like I love the food trucks. I love all the things we had down there. I know Marika had come up with, and Claire had come up with some ideas about a town yard sale or something like that downtown, and things like that. If we could have some events down there to draw foot traffic, I think that would be great. More community outreach instead of business outreach.
Yep.
We have that pocket park down on the south side, the Triangle Park, that we had talked about maybe having small local business craft fairs and different events like that. Now that the pandemic seems to be slowing down and, you know, more things being able to be done. There was some parking issues down there. I know that was a problem. But the insurance company where the old Ipanema used to be, they have an empty parking lot with, like, I think 28 or 30 spaces over there, as well as the office building itself where Dipanema was. So if we did on a weekend, those places are closed, we could have parking. Things like that.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I think I like the idea of business outreach and maybe some more community focused events. Julie, did I hear your voice? No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I just
oh.
wanted to add, sort of in the same line as of the outreach. I think there may be some parts of. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, yes, you're breaking up a little bit.
Can you
but
hear me or no?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, my phone's gonna die in a minute anyway, so I might drop off and call in. But I think there's some parts of the downtown initiative too that sort of got a little bit sidetracked as we're focused on zoning, including things like trails and connectivity. I know we've met with the Trails Committee in the past, but sort of regrouping on that piece of it, along with the beautification efforts that we've talked about as well. And also just making sure we're keeping our eye on things that also affect downtown. Like I know there's been a lot of talk in the buildings or whatever, the buildings committee, like there's thoughts about consolidating schools and possibly using Woodward as some sort of community type center townhouse thing. Just making sure that we're keeping our ear to the ground on that, and we know that, you know, we're incorporating that piece of it when we're thinking about downtown as well. But yeah, but certainly kind of that wayfinding piece, the connectivity piece, the beautification piece, I think are all still important, and we'll all sort of work together as we also try to help foster something happening downtown with the zoning that we've done.
No, I think, I do appreciate you going. I think we lost some of it, but if I might, fostering the connectivity to the trails strengthens the walkability of downtown, so that if people from further afield come to our downtown, they have a higher likelihood of shopping and going to the commercial things that can come in with the zoning. And with that goes along beautification. So I think I've taken those down as kind of like things we can definitely work on as well. Michael and Matt, any ideas? Yeah, Michael.
I was just, is there merit into Michael Waisham's, sewage study in the central septic system or the central sewage wastewater, looking for money for that, or we've got our study from Weston and Sampson. Is there some merit in trying to chase that and actually trying to get some traction with it?
I don't know. The one concern that I have on that is usually when you go to the state for funding, there's always that municipal match or the private match, and then trying to structure the capital stack to pay for all of that can sometimes be too daunting, particularly for a community like Southborough that's a little bit smaller. I think the residents who could tie into something down there, as opposed to the septic systems, which will fail, or Murrow's Market, which has to pump once a week. I think they might like something like that. We can, I suppose, continue our conversation with the engineering firm about it, but I might kind of let that settle for a bit.
Wait and see, right? I mean,
Yeah.
It's kind of wait and see, because I do, it's chicken and egg, whether our zoning versus sewage, and you get one, you get the other. So I agree. It's
Listen,
we get the zoning if we can get some movement somewhere, and if we get anything going there.
Yeah, listen, if we were to put in a system, I've got no doubt that we would see developers saying, okay, I'm going to take this parcel and improve it. But I don't want to be in a position to outlay that capital for it, build it and they will come type of thing.
Yeah,
I think
we're not
maybe
there.
with the right developer, we might. And so we'll have to see who brings a project to the table and then kind of go from there. I'm going to say bless you because it looked like you sneezed. Matt?
Yeah, no, I was going to say the same thing. In addition to the Angio restaurant and even the building next to it, which appears also to be potentially vacant. I can't really tell. It's just, I mean, it's actually more embarrassing to have something like that in our town than it is to have the vacant lots downtown. Quite frankly, I mean, and I drive by it every day, and it's the same thing. It's just how is this possible? In this prime location that we can't figure out a way to develop something there. I do think though, we should keep our eye on the septic on the wastewater conversation, because, I completely agree with what we all said or what people said in the meeting, which is you got to have the zoning first before anything else makes any sense. But now that we have the zoning, it's definitely a chicken and egg issue for sure, as you said, Rob, but it's a limiting issue potentially, and I think we need to be thoughtful about how there are different avenues to potentially pay for something like that to make downtown really like a real downtown, as opposed to what it is now, and what it can be without something like that ultimately.
Yeah.
Would it be in our best interest to reach out to Tony Kwan and ask what he'd allow and not allow into his 1 million gallon septic plant he's got over
I
next
think
to
we have
Reliant?
reached out to him in the past, but it's been a while. So
Might not be a bad idea to reach out to him again. And then the other thing, I know we had talked in the past to Karen Galligan about putting a couple of cross pipes under Main Street when they're tearing it up. And I don't think she has any money in her budget for that. So if that's going to be done, we might try to figure out where we could come up with that money, if there's any state money while they're digging it up for infrastructure. Because if we dig it up afterwards, it's going to cost us 100 times more than what it would cost us to put 2 pipes while they're already digging it in. Well, we've already got the CSX easements. So I agree with Matt that we should at least entertain the thoughts of what we could put, even the cross pipes, find how much those cost, just so they're there for infrastructure, if we can get into anything. And then if it goes into tying it to Tony Kwan's, which has no money to the town, I'm all for that, because I agree with a lot of people. I don't think, there'll be a lot of appetite to foot the bill for a $2 or $3 million sewage treatment plant that isn't done if it was done on a Betterment Act or somebody that needs to tie into it, I'd be a lot more agreeable to that. That's what they do in Weston. Than the whole town. I don't think that would fly if the whole town had to pay for it. So I think if we could figure out a cheap way to tie into Tony's and have some type of an infrastructure, and maybe figure out what except I know he said no beauty parlors or things like that. And I think there was no biotech, because I think bioscience, because of the different drainage issues with that as well.
Yeah. But maybe finding out how much it would cost to put in the pipes underneath the road, as long as it's going to be torn up, is a good idea. And like one of those things where it doesn't hurt to ask the question. So
yeah, I mean, because there's, right now no one's failing that we know of. They're getting pumped more, but they're not failing. But 20 years from now, a lot of these homes could be failing. So if we could have the conversation now with Tony and see, what that could handle, because I've heard, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, I've heard that thing can handle like tens of thousands of gallons a day.
You're muted, Chris.
So what was that?
Chris is muted. I think he was responding.
I had a conversation with Tony Kwan 5 years ago. He said, Chris, my septic system is available to the town. It won't accept restaurant. That was the one restriction. He may have mentioned others, but he said I couldn't handle a restaurant. but he said I could hook it up to different parts of the town. And I hope he's still engaged. He used to be a regular visitor to the town, and you could see him eating breakfast at Morrow's and have a chat with him. And I haven't seen him lately, so somebody needs to go down and have a very serious discussion about what the options are as we advance the cause here.
And it's a great idea.
Yeah, that is a great idea. I mean, I think the one obviously glaring hole in that is that, you know, restaurants are sort of one of the main targets of what we're looking for. So it's not an all-encompassing solution, right? So, but maybe if it can handle some other things, maybe you know, as somebody I think mentioned at town meeting, and we've talked about this before too, you know, the plan that Peter Bemis had for 2 Main Street had its own self-contained wastewater management system. So it's not impossible for a developer, I mean, an actual developer and an actual plan to do this self-funding. So, you know, I think just making sure that we're keeping all options on the table, exploring all options, because, you know, people got concerned about the wastewater issue at town meeting, and I understand it, but you know, nobody is asking the town to put a $3 million or $3.3 million bill right now, or ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I think we need to make sure we continue to make that clear that that's not the ask. So
Yeah. So to put it more goal oriented, because I'm taking some notes here. One of the goals should be to keep our eyes open on septic and sewerage opportunities, such as connecting to Tony Kwan, other grants to get the pipes put in, and making sure that if we do talk with the development community, that we make sure that they understand that the septic and all of those options are going to be a discussion item for them going forward. Does that sound? And that's basically keeping an eye on septic,
Yep.
kind of as the goal. Okay.
Sewage treatment, right? Sewage
Yeah,
treatment.
yeah. And to that end, I threw this on there. The next item is clean energy and sustainability. I threw it on there just it's more of a personal question for me, based upon some conversations I'd had with some other people. And let me give you a little bit of background. In Framingham at the REI, they've got solar canopies above their parking lot. In Sedona, Arizona, they've got solar canopies over their parking lots. When we went to town meeting and we were parked at the school, there's a parking lot. It's not surrounded by residential neighborhoods, but it's an open parking lot. I know that there are solar providers who will come in and put in solar canopies above parking lots of municipal buildings, at municipal buildings. They're willing to lease the land out from the town and pay a pilot to the town in order to have the solar there. Basically, they send it off and they sell it to the grid. Some people dislike the idea of solar canopies. They say it ruins the character of the town. I've heard some people argue it's a parking lot covered with a canopy. How can you ruin a parking lot? I've heard people argue that, listen, it actually helps the people in the schools because their car is covered in the wintertime when it snows. Their cars do not bake in the summertime. It all of a sudden, when you have to plow the parking lot, there's less to plow because part of it is covered by a solar canopy. Given what John had said about the potential a tough situation for the town from a fiscal standpoint, and given that as people who are older, we should be thinking about sustainability and clean energy, do we as the EDC want to do a little bit of research into what the benefits beyond what I just mentioned and what the downsides beyond what I mentioned might be available if we were to think about solar canopies on some of the municipally owned parking lots in town. Now, I wouldn't say doing this at Town Hall because it's right in the center of Town Hall, but the Trottier, that parking lot is right out in the middle, and really there is nothing that would be detrimental to the surrounding community. I'm just throwing that out there because I had a couple conversations with people and I thought it sounded cool. And I just wanted to run it by the committee.
I agree with you. We tried that at the public safety building. And Michael, we got 0 bids, correct?
It was a scale. I think it was just so small that nobody wanted to go after it. I agree, Rob. It's the right thing to do, and we got building stock. But yes, John, it was really just for the canopy that's covering the cruisers.
Yeah,
it was so small that none of these solar companies wanted to go after it because it was too small for them. But I think if we were to take an approach, holistically with our town and say, okay, what is our building stock? What do we have? What parking lots do we have? What roofs do we have?
I was gonna say what roofs, like school roofs too. I mean, they're
we
flat
got,
roofs.
And then John, maybe we can get that canopy at the police and fire station covered. But I agree, it's a good and right thing to do, and it's the panels are only getting more productive and better to kick more into the grid. So, but I would not do it as a parking lot by parking lot. I'd say, how do we do this town-wide?
So I to that end, if we could identify someone to take a look at and say, hey, listen, you as a solar company, take a look at these 8 properties that the town owns and their parking lots and their roofs. Can you give us some sense about whether or not it makes a financial standpoint? Because they got those, what is it? They solar directional things where they kind of say this is the best location based upon the trees and stuff like that. Maybe that's, I just think it's the right thing to do. But from a financial standpoint, if someone's willing to rent out our parking lots and we don't lose any parking spaces and we've got a pilot set up and they're giving us $30,000 a year for 20 years, all of a sudden that's some work on the field or whatever. And I'm just throwing those numbers out there because I don't know what they are. They could be more, but it was just something I was thinking about. Other comments?
Yeah, in that vein, I mean, I think, isn't it similarly true for electric car charging stations? I'm not exactly sure, but I think that like Tesla and other companies actually do something similar, well, because they want their stations places. So when thinking about any growth and development, is there an opportunity also to make that more? I mean, there's tons of Teslas in our town. I don't expect that's going to go away. And more this year and next year, many more electric cars are going to be flooding the markets. And our town is, there's a lot of new cars driving around, nice new cars. So I think, in the same vein, I would look at that too.
Charging stations? Okay. I know, Marika, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I think it was more than a year ago. One of those, I don't know which one, they had a special program where they would subsidize the whole installation of electric car charging stations. And I know one of the businesses in downtown was interested to get one and give a parking spot for that purpose. And I actually spoke about it with some town employees and John Parent, and they said they would explore it, and they were just a little bit hesitant because they thought, oh, there's already limited parking spaces like what that the town owns, and then you're going to reserve it for just very few people maybe in town who own electric cars, and then maybe people from out of town because there are special apps would take up that space. So there was some concern, but I still think it's the the way to go, and I think more and more people, even Southborough residents, have electric cars. So I think it would be great to take that step. But that I'm just telling you that we tried to bring that to their attention, but so far nothing yet.
Okay. I don't think we should give up on that. Not only to Julie's point that I've seen a lot of Teslas out on the road, but we need to be thinking a little bit about future generations. And not that I'm going to hop up on my soapbox, but that's why we had a little bit of density in our downtown, walkability, and to get people out of their cars. So, okay. So maybe, Marika, unless anyone, let me put it this way. And Chris and Matt, I haven't garnered your opinions yet. Some people really hate how solar canopies look, and it's a more aesthetic thing as opposed to functionality or what it means for the environment. Do either of you kind of feel like that might be detrimental to the to the let's call it municipal parking lots?
I think if there's a need, it could be a big plus. So we can certainly question and get feedback to see how important it is as a priority. Before I forget this thought, when you talk about walkability, you can actually go to an app called the Walkability site and measure, and they have a scorecard for your home in terms of walkability. And they say people use it when they move to a town, they want to be in a place where there's a high score for walkability. So just as a reference. Anyways, but no, talking about the idea, I think it's a question of getting feedback. I think people are always enlightened and supportive of new things, and it's certainly worth. Now, it isn't a solar place. Anybody go to Arturo's restaurant? And well, they've taken up a whole chunk of a parking lot and got a giant tent where they serve people dinner. I mean, that's not a solar place, but there's a place where tents have been used and nobody seems to be objecting, but a solar idea sounds pretty good.
Yeah, Matt?
Yeah, I think in certain places it'll fly and other places it won't. It's just gonna, some people are gonna absolutely hate it and some people are gonna like it, just like the downtown district. So
Yep.
I think first step is you got to figure out where it's viable what sites it's viable on. And then, some will, places like Neary and Trottier seem to me to be fairly obvious. Other places like, the other place, I can't think off the top of my head, but other places with townhouses, an example, like that, they're not going to work. So, it's going to be a hit and miss, but I think at least it starts with what's commercially viable, and then you go from there.
Exactly. Yeah. Michael?
I think we all ought to celebrate. Tony Kwan took the lead on solar panels just to keep his Reliance Center. He's got one of the largest solar panel outside the Reliant Medical Center, and then Bill DePietri built one across from the entrance to the transfer station. So you've got people who've used solar as a means of driving energy, and certainly this is, we've demonstrated that people are receptive.
Yeah, I'd prefer to keep I'm not a huge fan of ground mounted solar, simply because it covers the grass, you don't have the trees, and there are people, I know more about solar than I should, but there are solar developers out west who cut down a whole bunch of trees to put up solar panels, and they say we're green.
Yeah.
The idea of a canopy over a parking lot, for my money, sounds hell yeah. It's a parking lot. What commercial value do you get from it? And so if we're thinking about economic development and revenue to the town, leveraging town property, which doesn't pay taxes right now, to get some revenue into the town sounds like a good thought.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. And I have very, very few concerns about the aesthetic piece of it, especially if we're looking more at that rooftop or parking lot format. I think the parking lot format serves multiple purposes, like you said. It incrementally increases energy efficient by making your car not have to cool off as quickly or warm up as quickly, plowing, all that stuff. And I think if there's an economic incentive, advantage to doing it, if that can make money for the town, I think it's a tough argument for almost anybody to stand up and say, well, I think it's a little bit ugly. If you say it's bringing in money, it's good for the environment in this day and age. And I think it's, we talk a lot about branding downtown, branding the town, I think it makes a statement of the town to be a leader on something like that, especially in this day and age. So I'm fully supporting
Yeah.
with it.
I was just wondering who owns the MBTA, the commuter rail parking lot.
The MBTA actually owns that. And funnily enough, back pre-pandemic, the MBTA sent out an RFP to a solar provider to put solar canopies over 37 MBTA parking lots in Massachusetts. One of them happened to be in Billerica, where I was, and I had lots of conversations about how those were set up. Southborough was one of the other ones as well. The MBTA chose not to go forward with that because of whatever reason, but the MBTA actually was exploring doing that over, it might be 37, but I thought it was 38 MBTA lots throughout Massachusetts. So,
But the lot's not Southborough's, bottom
No.
line. Right?
no,
Gotcha.
but because that would be listen, if you're talking about it, it's, 450 parking spaces. That's got to be 5 acres. You put 4 of them underneath solar canopies. But sorry, I got off topic. So Marika, maybe you and I can talk about that and we'll do a little bit of research into it.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
Yeah, I think
Perfect.
that would actually be obviously there are a lot of logistics and somebody needs to drive the bus and find the company and make sure it's actually something that it would be income producing. And it's interesting to me that they looked into it for the public safety building and it wasn't, so that we can get the volume. It'll take a lot of planning, but if we can get that planning in place, I think it's an easy win. I don't see that being, and maybe I speak too soon because everything's controversial, but I see that as a pretty easy sell to the town. So.
Yeah, listen, we're not going to get anything unless we do a little bit of research and maybe think outside of the box a little bit. So I actually like that idea. I don't have any kids, but I think if we really want to make a statement about planning for our future for everybody, we have to think about being a little bit more sustainable and have some clean energy. So Marika and I will work on that. Administrative business. The approval of the meeting minutes for September 9th, September 20th, and September 24th. I think Claire had sent a note saying that there was not a quorum for September 20th. Marika,
Yeah,
am I correct on that?
That's correct. Yeah, so there was no quorum. That was the joint meeting, I think, as well. And September 24th, I think we will vote on those at the next meeting. So it's just September 9th minutes.
Okay. Did people have the chance to take a look at the September 9th minutes?
Make a motion to accept the September 9 minutes as written.
Second. Second.
I second it. I only say it's if there are initials being used, no abbreviations.
Okay. So I heard a second. I got Chris's comment. So with no further discussion, I'm going to go around for the approval of the minutes. Matt?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes,
Julie?
Yes.
Michael? John?
Yes, aye.
Rob, unanimous, 6-0. Marika, do we have any unfinished business?
Nope, not that I know of, nothing.
I'd like to mention something, but if you're about to close it out,
No, I was going to go to new business and then public comment.
okay, oh, great.
So do we have any new business? Okay, no new business. Do we have any public comment?
Do we have anybody?
We do. We've got Kevin Miller and Marcy Jones.
And there is a note in the chat, I think from earlier, sorry, from, it looks like from Marcy Jones saying that sewage will be key. She appreciates the conversation. So that was from a little while ago.
Yeah, it's with regard to septic and sewer, chicken and egg. A developer is going to take a kind of lead role if they come forward with the project. So, Kevin, Marcy. Okay, I do not see a hand raised. Chris, you just underneath the other business as may properly come before the committee. You were going to have a comment.
I'm gonna pass for now, but I do want to say it's the passing of the bylaw was an extraordinary accomplishment over years of hard work. And I think the network that each of us have in terms of reaching out to the community and the different groups that we reached out to, both citizens, door to door, memos, the blog, all contributed to not only getting the interest we had, and also the collaboration with the different boards made a huge difference in attracting people to come and attend. I had a couple of people said it's about time. We need this. So there was a lot of personal affirmations about the hard work, everyone in the community that participated. And I think that's a formula for future success, because the road ahead is going to be even tougher with Route 9 and the scale of responsibility. And those listening and those who will need to work with, we've got to revisit them and have a call to action for all of us to muster all the strength we have and have demonstrated to succeed again.
No, very good point. And once again, I have to say, Julie, fabulous job presenting and bringing as many people to the town meeting as possible. It was really good, and 73% passage on a zoning change is pretty damn good.
Yeah,
I'll
I
just
was
say that.
pleasantly surprised that it wasn't even all that close when it came down to it. So it was a nail biter for a few minutes when they were tallying the votes for sure. But no, it was great turn. I mean, they were not expecting very good turnout, and there were a lot of issues. There was a huge outbreak of COVID in the schools that day, and lots of neighbors and friends who were planning on going texting me at the last minute saying, "I'm so sorry, kid tested positive," and but still the turnout was really strong. So I think I heard they almost ran out of room. So that was interesting. But no, it's everything's better when there's good turnout. I mean, I wish more people came regularly. I hope that this is going to help people want to be more engaged and come more. So
yeah, and I think it's appropriate more than ever now to thank all of those who enabled this to happen. I mean, we can pat ourselves on the back, but none of this could be accomplished without some of the listeners, without all the committees. And I think there's a mechanism to acknowledge their support through a thank you note and ask for their stepping forward with us on the next initiative.
Yeah, I've done some of that myself. We probably should do it more formally as a committee, but I've certainly reached out to folks who were really helpful to us. So
excellent. I've reached the end of our agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Okay, I'm going to go around. Matt?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Okay, we are adjourned. Next meeting might be Friday, November 19th. we'll probably do an email out individually to see if it works for everyone. But thanks to everyone for this evening's meeting.
Rob,
Thank
thank you
you.
for getting it done in an hour and 15.
Yeah. good
Thank
time.
you.
Awesome. And we got a lot done.
Bravo.
We got a lot
You did
accomplished.
get-
All right. Well
Did
done.
get a lot done. Okay, excellent. Thanks.
Good
Bye-bye.
night, everybody.